power to financially destroy. Of course, much of the economic distress that we suffer today was generated by the corrupt activities of the Federal Reserve, a privately controlled banking cartel, and global financing conglomerates like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. However, the government's complicity in these activities cannot be denied. It was the congressional repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act that gave international banks the ability to derivatize massive numbers of mortgages and create the ongoing implosion of the housing bubble. It was the SEC that turned the other cheek for years, while credit fraud flooded markets and rating agencies gave AAA status to toxic and basically worthless assets. It is the bought and paid for U.S. government to this day that defends the Federal Reserve's non-stop quantitative easing, the destruction of the dollar, the real reason why you and I are spending more on gasoline and food, and the increased deficit spending driving our nation even deeper into debt slavery. The passage of the bailouts, despite an 80% opposition from the public, sent a stark message. The government does not care what you think about the economy and will do what it pleases, even if it means destroying your means of fiscal survival. The power to imprison without trial. The NDAA is truly a perfect representation of the kind of power the government would like to have over the people, no questions asked. The Obama administration's half-hearted promise to not use the provisions of the legislation to detain American citizens indefinitely without trial are little comfort, especially when one considers that the man has not kept a single positive promise since taking office in 2008. Frankly, I would have slightly more respect for the president, which isn't much, if he had the guts to come out and admit what the language of the NDAA clearly states, that American citizens can and will be designated as enemy combatants under the rules of war, and that anyone, regardless of citizenship, can be labeled a terrorist for any reason by the executive branch. I suppose the one good side effect of the passage of the NDAA is the level of awakening going on in the American public to the direction our country is taking. Not to mention the scrambling that political representatives now have to do to cover themselves and explain away their support for the draconian measures. For those who do not grasp the ultimate goal of this kind of legislation, the NDAA seems outlandish or insane. But in a certain light, it is perfectly logical. A government that seeks totalitarian control is required to remove the protections that a jury trial affords. Otherwise, it cannot function in the manner it desires. If a person is given the opportunity of a jury by his peers, this takes the ability to criminalize out of the hands of the government and places it in the hands of a third party. Just as in the economy, the globalists who stand at the helm of our country would very much like to centralize law. This means removing all checks and balances from the equation. In the name of national security, Washington, D.C. considers all things possible. The power to kill without trial. Another program supported by both Republicans and Democratic presidents. The ability to assassinate American citizens without trial based on mere accusations from the executive branch is a highly useful tool for tyranny. Over the past couple of years, the questions have always been, how far do they plan to take this policy, and will they try to use it against American citizens on American soil? These questions have been indirectly answered by FBI head Robert Mueller when he tried to dodge them in a recent hearing. Mueller's claim that he is not sure if Americans can be assassinated on U.S. soil is the same as an admission that this is, at the very least, being considered. Given the legalese wrangling that both Mueller and Eric, the Fast and Furious Holder, have tried to implement in rationalizing the use of assassination, I find it hard to fathom that anyone would not expect they would use the policy for Americans on home turf. The power to kill or imprison without trial is expressly forbidden by constitutional law and the Bill of Rights. Such abuses were the primary cause of the Revolutionary War, yet here we are again, dealing with the same murderous reasoning with a slightly different face. The power to militarize. Federal fusion centers and funding for law enforcement has irreparably damaged state and county objectivity and opened the door to a steady diet of anti-liberty propaganda for police officials across the nation. Some eat it up, and some don't. However, the issue here is one of intention. Why does the federal government feel the need to arm divisions of local law enforcement with automatic weapons, predator drones, and even tanks? Why is Congress going out of its way to free up FAA regulations to allow police organizations unprecedented access to predator drones, up to 30,000 by 2020, for use in civilian airspace? Why does the DHS suddenly need 450 million rounds of .40 caliber ammunition from ATK? And why has Obama quickly and quietly signed the executive order for National Defense Resource Preparedness? Though many will claim the order only rehashes such continuity of government policies seen in older programs like Rex 84, I find it a bit disconcerting that our government suddenly feels the need to rehash Rex 84 powers at all. The order is a claim to eminent domain, not just over land, but over every resource imaginable in the face of a national emergency. Using military force, all goods, services, and property can be confiscated in the name of support for military and governmental logistics. The language of supply chain protection and resource allocation comes by the legalization of theft of goods and resources from the American people themselves. Now we see that this was indeed the intention all along. Given what the John Warner Defense Authorization Act allows the President to declare a national emergency and martial law for almost any reason at any time without oversight from Congress for at least 6 months, the possibility of vast programs of resource confiscation become much more likely. The power to militarize a culture at will and to force that culture to work and produce in the name of the state and the benefit of the state is perhaps the most terrifying power of all. It is, for all intents and purposes, the power to enslave. What has our government become? Really, who needs terrorists when you have a government like ours? If it is the widespread destruction of the principles that founded our society that you fear, then the last enemy you need worry about is the Muslim boogeyman. The greatest threat to our way of life is an institution that has always operated right under our very noses and acted with impunity, sheltered by the very borders it is tasked to defend. It is the only group in existence that has the resources, the military backing, and the proven intent to undermine liberty in America. It is the supreme threat to individual freedom in the world today. And the worst irony of all is that it commits every one of its crimes in our name. So there comes a point when we have to decide what kind of respect this brand of monstrosity deserves. It would appear that the government, or at least root elements of it, see the American people as the enemy. And why not? We are, in the end, the only force on the planet in a position to deconstruct the machine. So it only follows that we find ourselves locked in its crosshairs. We have not been given much choice. The only decision left to make is one within each individual. How much do we really need the system? And how much pain and horror are we willing to endure to satisfy its insatiable hunger? Where will we finally draw the line?